These days, I think there are two really strong reasons why you need to do research for fiction. One relates to the reader and one to the writer. So readers these days are very sophisticated. They know a lot about quite a lot of things, and in order to gain their trust, they have to know that you know what you're talking about. So doing your research gives you a way of creating a world with verisimilitude, a sense that you're in command of your material. And for you as a writer, going into that research gives you something to say. It gives you the details, it gives you the wonderful quote, it gives you the moment, the anecdote. So it's doing your work for you, and it's allowing you to create that vivid world in which the reader can lose themselves.
I just don't think the specific details hold up otherwise. And it's not so much a matter of, alienating certain readers who know something that you don't and you haven't put on the page in a way that's realistic or correct. It's also that some of the life and energy of fiction exists in specific detail. And there's something about getting it right, there's something about firsthand experience that is irreplaceable, and it varies as to what that means. You may just need a texture or something. You may need, and in other cases you need something else entirely. I had a novel where I had basically a city in conflict, a kind of failed city-state, and the only thing that worked in terms of understanding what that experience was to read first-hand witness accounts of people who have lived in those kinds of situations. And even then I didn't feel comfortable having a real place to write about, because that then carries all the baggage of knowing all of those details. So one reason that I sometimes turn to fabulous fiction or fantasy is you can cook or transpose those things in a way that seems real, but you don't have to also have the burden of making everything else real at the same time, and you can still get to a kind of a truth. With the Southern Reach trilogy, I was really adamant that the natural details of the world will all be firsthand. There's not a single part of that book where the details are secondhand on anything to do with the South, anything to do with nature at all. Everything is something that I've experienced. And I think that adds a huge amount of authenticity to it. I don't believe that you can only write the things that you know personally, but I do know that for this series it was a huge advantage, because that sometimes allows you to relax into things like setting, and then your attention turns to other things. And so there's a complexity in terms of the disconnects between characters in those books that I'm not sure I would have been able to reach if I had also had to research all the natural elements. It's just there's a lot of things that you have to consider. But it's very situational as to what research means and when it's useful and when it's not. There are times when I will just go ahead and I will write a rough draft knowing that things are inaccurate, and then I will go back and research, because you can also become too baroquely encrusted with the research that you do. And sometimes you even need distance from the research. If you know in advance, well in advance, that you're going to do a project, there is nothing you can do better for yourself than to immerse yourself in research a great distance from the time you're going to write. Clearly you can't always do that, but for example, I took on a gig reviewing noir thrillers for Publishers Weekly, because I knew about 5 years down the road I was going to be writing one. And so basically for 5 years I got these books that I wouldn't have normally picked up. I would just assign stuff, and I was reviewing like one a month. And so I became completely immersed in that genre in a way I wouldn't have otherwise. And so by the time I had an opportunity to write the book, I didn't have to worry about assimilating the tropes. I didn't have to worry about, any of that. I could just subvert whatever I wanted to subvert because I already knew it. I had internalized it.
I think if I'm reading other people's historical fiction, I look for that smell of authenticity, which often I think can only come from having done the research and knowing the period. And the research could be a lot of different things. I mean, it doesn't mean necessarily poring over musty documents. It can be looking at paintings from the period, or drawings, or listening to music composed at that time, or there's any number of things. But I prefer that historical fiction where the author's done that sort of work and has a command of the telling detail. something completely unexpected sometimes.